Good evening. Gonna do some more wet wood again. Gotta get these last handful of pieces out of the tub that they're in. That's where my wood scraps go, and it's become a bit of an issue. That looks close enough to start. I didn't take the time or trouble to round anything over, cut any corners off. So I just turn them away. It's a little easier than getting rid of tiny little chips all the time. Tiny little pieces of wood. Chips are a little easier to get rid of. And as you see, it only takes a couple, really doesn't take very long to get it to where it's round. So a handful, well, not quite round yet. The handful of cuts and we're there. We're just getting the cardboard templates out and all that good stuff to cut it round. Now we're close enough. So we can set our high points, set our low points. Looks like we could move a little bit that direction. I think that'll be good enough to proceed. I don't have enough room. So we'll flatten out the bottom so we can get a tenon on it. Should be able to bring the speed up just a little bit. Still a little bit out of balance. We're probably going to use the bigger, we'll use the bigger one of the two. And chuck, bigger jaws. These will be a twice turn piece, so we use the bigger ones, and when we get to the final, once it dries, then we can use the smaller, some sort of smaller jaws to go from there. Now that we've gotten everything sort of flattened out and rounded out, now I can bring our speed up. It'll allow me to move a little quicker. Tool rest wasn't quite tight enough. Started to move. And hearing some bark tapping away there, so that might be a bit of an issue. This is a rough shape at our tenant. This looks like it could be a shade bit on the deep side for what I want. We'll see. Yeah, definitely. If I go over the magic 50%. Yeah, see, this is cherry. It's an ornamental cherry, but nonetheless, it likes to. The bark staying on is almost never on the cherry. As you can see, it's kind of like a paper type bark, so it just peels it right off. The rest of it may or may not remain, but probably not. Still looks a bit on the fat, clunky side. So we get a tenant in there. Still doesn't. Still not doing something for me. For one, that foot is probably a little on the big side. Decisions. Make it in a little bit more. That'll probably be good enough for a rough turn. Crisp, clean corner. Round that a little bit. Get rid of some of this. Should be close enough. Shouldn't have done that. Now it's on the floor. And it will hurt when you step on it. So I say I shouldn't have done that. We have 4 of these to do, so I think I'm going to do the outside of them, a couple of them, and then we'll flip around and do the inside. Just to try and make it a little quicker and easier. Stuff sitting in the tub is starting to grow, which is why it needs to get taken care of. Growing, you can see, it's growing mold. So it's starting to have a bit of an aroma to it, for one. And the sap's coming out, and I just stick my fingers in. So we'll just get rid of this. Get rid of this corner right off the bat. Lower speed way down. I'm standing off to the side. Mirror speed up till we get a vibration, which won't be very high because it's well out of balance. And probably only cutting on one little place. That means I have to proceed quite slowly to allow the wood to come around to be cut. Or the tool will bounce. And we don't want that. So we'll just move in. Make sure nothing's going to touch. Proceed on. Get a couple RPMs out of it, not much. That's got us close to being round. There's a little burl eyes there, but they're going to go away. So now we can check our heights. And we need to come this way, half the distance. That was about a quarter, so I moved over about an eighth, thereabouts. You might as well check the low ones. The low one's going to be considerably off on that one. Let's move that direction. That's why I don't have the Live Center does not have the point in it. So that I can manipulate this without contending with a point sticking into something and wanting to go back into its original hole. It just works a whole lot easier. Now we'll see what we did anything any good. It's a little hard to tell somewhat on the low points. This one actually has a really low side on it. I'm more interested in what it did to my high ones. Still not quite there on the high ones. Maybe I went the wrong way. Let's go that way. And that way just a little bit. I try and make them even. I don't know that it's... A lot of people don't mess with that. But to me it makes them look better. Also makes them a whole lot easier to turn. And I'll be able to get the speed up quicker. And that works too. I have one that goes over the... just goes over the threads. But it's easier... I find it easier just to take the point out. And if you have the robust one, I think that one is really easy to take out. Or you can even slide it the whole way. Is that the one? That's the one you can turn, slide it the whole way back in even, where nothing sticks out. And I still want a good, the reason I use the rings is because it's still giving me a good grip. Because if I was to do that with just like a little block of wood or whatever on there, why things could move on me, and I don't want either. But everybody has their own way of doing it, of course. So that should be flat on the bottom. Flat enough. Let's see. Yes, indeed. I like the statement of you ask 100 wood turners a simple question, you get about 110 answers. It's kind of what, it's whatever works best for you. But I've kind of got involved in some of the teaching aspects of some of this, and now you think more along the lines of how can you teach somebody, and rather than just saying, well, you have to figure that out on your own. Well, if you don't have a place to start, how do you figure it out on your own? You have to have somebody tell you or watch somebody and hope they're explaining what they're doing. That's my golden rule number one right there is no matter what bowl I'm doing, I get rid of the corner. And that's one of the things I am teaching is to get rid of this corner. That way they can't make this square-sided bowl. I guess it's going to be just like the last one. It's going to be a little deep for my likings. Most of the natural edge bowls that I do, they're really pretty much decorative, so I try and keep them shallow. Try and get a nice sort of shallow curve to them. That's going to be I will just remark it again. I probably could be using the smaller jaws too. The smaller gouge so I can get in here. That's the one I was using as a 5/8. And I just can't get in beside the tailstock very well. Go back to a 1/2 inch. And we should be able to make one nice sweeping curve bottom to top. And the paper bark is coming off as it did the last one. Here, slapping around. So rather than get my finger smacked, I just take it off. Very seldom do I end up with a natural edge bowl that actually has the bark on it. But if you do any amount of these, you'll figure it out in a pretty big hurry that as they dry, the bark cambium layer dries more than the, or shrinks more than the rest of it. So keeping the bark is kind of a rarity. I mean, you can always the philosophy of cutting it in the middle of the winter, and it helps, but doesn't always work. But just clean up my tenant. A good solid corner, nice crisp clean corner in there for it to grip onto. Knock that corner off a little bit. That a little smaller. There really won't. It's kind of an irrelevant thing to actually have. Kind of nice if you have it, but you don't have to have that to put it back on once it dries. That's two of them little ones done. The outside done. I'm going to do the outsides on, I think, all three or all four of these before I go to the inside. Kind of do it in production mode kind of thing. But I do drill a hole down through the, that's one thing that most people will agree on, is to drill a hole down through the bark and the cambium layer into solid material so you can get the drive center to bite quite well. Although I've seen some people use face plates doing this, but as far as I'm concerned, that's not quite the way to do it. But once again, if it works for them, then they can have at it. Oh, this one's going to be well out of bounds. It's got a, that's sort of a, stuff sort of has some burls on it, but really weren't very worthy of the burls. There had to be one place it's going to be bigger. So I can do a half-ass alignment. It looked like it was way out of whack, which it was. Just sight that across my finger and hopefully don't spin it around and whack my finger. Because yes, I have done that already. Not a nice thing to do. But we'll get back to business. Start out nice and slow. I'm off to the side, out of the line of fire. Won't be able to bring the speed up much, but we know the bottom, down at the bottom is where it's at. There are a couple cuts. There's one of these. Looks like some of the bark actually is kind of loose on them already. They've actually been around here for probably the best end of 2 months. They've been sitting in a tub, not sealed, but it had a top on it, so there wasn't much air getting to them. They're still plenty wet. And we should be getting closer. One thing with the wet wood, you can take some really nice, manly kind of cuts in it without hardly any effort. Not that you can't take a pretty good cut in a piece of dry wood, but boy, it just slides right along. Okay, so that's our end. Ends are clean. Not quite aligned on the end. Looks like not quite on that. So, which is the long? It needs to go that way, down. This is where it's really not an exacting science, but got to move it in the direction it needs to go to take more off of one side than the other. And you do a couple hundred or something, you have a tendency to sort of start to figure it out a little bit. So I didn't get my body in quite the right place because I losing bevel contact. You see the lines showing up. So, see the top, the high points, it looks good. Low point still looks lower on one side than it is the other. These are kind of an odd shaped tree in a way, although the pith is like dead center because there's a tiny bit of that left right there. So we need to take more off of that side than the other side. I'm just going to move it, and we're going to go to the bottom and go from there. Because doing it this way, that's one advantage of doing it between centers, is that we're not locked into anything until we even once you put the tenon on, you're still not necessarily totally locked into it, but we can make our shape. If we don't like it, we can still move it more and recut a little bit. I'm gonna have to stop and clean up after this one now. It's gonna be pretty flat. And there's a little bit, tiny bit of pith there, the hint of it there. So I should just get rid of the things you don't need, don't want. And that we don't want for sure, because that will be the first place it cracks. Now it's all gone. You can see by the color in the wood, there's really some moisture there that's left in there. Not a surprise. Get some of this corner away and we should be able to get the speed that I want. Also need to go sharpen this gouge. So we need to know where our bottom's going to be. Let's go to the sharp 1/2 inch one. Not quite to the top though. A little bit of burl. That right there that's probably the very hardest thing I've had to try and working with this teaching thing is to try and get people to make a curve. Doesn't seem like rocket science to me, but they think just because their mind says that it should be a curve, that the tool magically makes it happen. But yes, that is a spindle gouge. Does work for some of the things in the bowl world. Since we did not change that much. Or didn't reduce it by much, I can leave that one on. That'll go in between the jaws without any trouble. Don't have play with the scraper a second here. See what the scraper will actually do on a wet piece of wood. I think I tried it before. I don't really quite remember what it did. I think it did all right, but So we need to be at center whenever we're at a downward little angle. And bring the tool rest up a little bit and back a little bit. And just refine the curve. There's still some tool marks left, but like I say, the scraper has a burr on it, but it might actually have the big hairy burr on it. This is going to move like crazy anyhow, so this is kind of a waste of time. It's just kind of experimentation with, starting to use more and more of the traditional scraper, so it's always a plus to know what they're going to do in a given situation. And we got one more to do. And more of these cherry ones, anyhow, put it that way. I think this is the worst one of the bunch because it's got a big goony burl on it that's going to be in the road. But I'll still do it the same way. I'll try and, I'm not sure what we're going to do as far as trying to even it up because it's got a huge knotty looking thing on it. Some ways I'd kind of like to leave that knotty looking thing on there. Ooh, that's interesting. Like I gotta get rid of that. That's actually running into the headstock a little bit. Yeah. This is where you cut your fingers with your own saw. Japanese saws do not like cutting wet wood either. Gums the teeth up right away. Quick reactions to get your feet out of the road. So I get the ram back in them. Of course not. Just use the power of the lathe. That's the way a lot of people do it. Other people will tell you though that you shouldn't really do it that way. A little hard on the bearings. But if we set the stop a little bit, wiggle it back and forth a little bit, drive a little more, wiggle, drive a little more, and we're solid. Really? What part of the country do you live in? I'm in Pennsylvania. We don't have, I don't think we have any bobcats. Put it that way. Oh, okay. Yeah, bobcats. Ooh. Here in Pennsylvania, occasional bear, but not much. I live in sort of suburban area to start with, so This one ought to be a good challenge because it's not going to let me do. It is so well out of balance. But we're going to get rid of these corners. And then we'll go from there. Let me switch to a smaller gouge, so I'm going to have to move more. Because the other one needs a trip to the grinder. Oh, gotta watch them. Oh, there you go. In the black walnut, yeah. Yes, some people are willing to spend a lot of money for black walnut. I personally don't care for it, but that's just me. I have some, but I don't. Black walnut doesn't like me. I should put it that way. More so than anything else. The dust of it. I can do alright turning it. When I do it like this, when it's wet, is alright. But when I come back to do it the second time, then that's pretty much dust collection is running the whole time. Yeah. Yes. Oh, I don't know which one's worse. I have some ash that has had the bark on it. I had some that I got a long time ago and cut it into blanks, and it actually has dried with the bark on. And I did one of them a while back, and it's like, oh my gosh, I don't. I think it would be a toss up as to which one would be worse as far as the dust that's coming off of the bark. Need to move that way. We're going to run into this growth. I have some black walnut that is actually white. I can show you a piece here in a couple of minutes when I go back over to. Like I say, I don't do much black walnut, so I'm gonna take your word for that one. But all of it that you keep the bark on. Well, not so much the fruit wood ones, the cherries and stuff like that. It's not bad, but I have some that's white the whole way through, almost the whole way through. My forestry guy tells me, and he's the one that got it for me. He said that particular tree, or two trees, I think come off of two different trees, were all trees that grew sort of residential. So they grow faster, get more, usually get more sunlight. So they don't necessarily get the black color. They hand somebody something you turned out of it, and then right away, well, what kind of wood is this? Well, it's black walnut. Well, it's not black, or it's not brown, the typical brown. I have no idea how to figure out where the hmm, hmm, hmm. Guess it's going to be an odd looking piece. Barely touching there. We're taking some off there. Let's move that direction. Let's go up a little bit and see what it does. Besides throw way out of whack, of course. Definitely, I have some more of these pieces down in my shed that had bigger, what appears to be burls on them. And they definitely are. They have some of the characteristics of a burl. There again, this tree was grown in residential area too. And whatever's in the burl seems as though it's taking the edge off. Oh, just keep getting bigger. And they claim that you can cut them off and not hurt the tree. Cut them off and put some sort of paint or seal or something on that place where you cut them off at. And if anything, they may actually grow another burl back. Okay, so we got some there. Still don't have much there. Hmm. Oh, okay. Yeah, there's I don't know, it's some sort of an ornamental tree. I'm gonna say it's either a cherry or something or other. Like I say, I live in residential, and it's out just out the road a little piece for me, and I'm like, I wonder if a piece, and it's huge. I mean, that sucker's got to be 2 foot in diameter. And I'm like, what if people would notice if I come along some night in the middle of the night and cut the burl off? But I think that would get somebody's attention if they heard a chainsaw run in the middle of the night. But yeah, my neighbor has one of them. I think borrow his. He doesn't something with his wrist or something or other. He can't stand to use any kind of like the gas powered, like the weed whackers and the chainsaws and stuff like that. The vibration just drives his wrist or something nuts. So he does have one of them. He has a Ryobi one, I want to say, maybe. I helped him cut up a tree in his yard the other year, and he brought it out and used it. Of course, he's not real energetic to start with, but yeah. And there again, there is from what I've seen out of some of that stuff. There is some of that stuff out there has become very very good compared to what it was years ago. Yeah, I mean, I'm at the age that I really didn't grow up around a whole lot of the or as much of the battery powered stuff as what they have nowadays. But yeah, the only thing I don't know, kind of my little kind of pet peeve with any of the battery stuff nowadays is the fact of how expensive the batteries are. Granted, they last a while, quite a while, but I'm kind of a fan of Makita. I've used Makita tools for a very long time, and I did last year, I think it was. They had a super duper special going on, and if you bought the 2 pack of batteries with the charger, I think they call it like a starter set, or starter kit, or something like that. Then you could pick a tool to go with it, and the tool came free. So I did do that, but well, that's my daughter and son-in-law. They had a uh, battery powered lawnmower. Not a real expensive one. It's one of the Ryobi ones. And just like you said, a couple of weeks ago, their battery went bad, or its life expectancy was over, or whatever. And they went back to get a second battery, or get another battery, and for I think it was $50 or $60 more, they could buy a brand new mower and get a new battery. So that's what they ended up. That's what they did. And my dad just bought a Ego, whichever one it is that they sell at Lowe's. I think it's the Ego, and he's happy with it so far. But there again, the batteries are huge and heavy. But at 80 some years old, he was having trouble pulling the starter on, the traditional push mower. So that was his way of getting around it. But he said it does a really nice job. Came with a couple blade, a couple different blades for the mower, and and each blade has its own little sort of purpose, I guess. But so far he likes it. One of these days I'll get in there when he has it out or something or other to see. I don't do a whole lot of. My yard is not huge by any means, but I also don't have the interest in mowing my yard by hand either. But I have a good size zero turn mower, so I do it that way rather than push mowing. This is going to be especially challenging because now we got to. I was thinking that. A little pink stripe in it. How are we going to curve? Yeah, yeah. No, mine's about 30 minutes, and that's with a 48-inch zero turn. No, no. I don't have that kind of time. If I was retired, and then it would be different or whatever, but I'm not, so yeah. Never had the misfortune of having a yard that big. I wouldn't say it's a misfortune. I would say it's a fortunate that you can have that big of a property, but of course the other thing that I could do, probably what I should have done is just cut that row off to start with and saved it for something more special than this. Hmm. Oh well. It's kind of a challenge to get the curve to what I want. I think the other one we're going to have to shrink down in diameter a little bit. So otherwise I'm not going to have a whole lot of curve to it. It's not enough for what I want. Also rather difficult up there when you get in one tiny little place. This is the only place for cutting. And it's only doing about 600 RPMs. So that's me being aggressive too. But a nice sharp gouge. See if I can get it to cooperate. Or not. I'm just kind of listen to some vibration for a second. Okay, that's enough of that. So that'll be all right. Now we can redo the foot. Let it dry. It does have some really kind of pretty burl in it. There's still some bark or something there, but probably smaller than the diameter. And then about there. I think that'll give it to us. Clean it up just a little bit. I don't really want to make that super small. Since it's out of balance. There's a whole lot of pressure on it. That's going to be one goofy looking ball. But some people like goofy, so now we're definitely going to go sharpen. I'm going to probably mainly use the 1/2 inch to do the inside, but just touch them all up. I'm going to use that one a tiny little bit, so that one should still be sharp. So we'll do the, that's the other wonders of working with wet wood, is the amount of crap that sticks to the tools and your hands. That's the other one I don't like on the black walnut. I don't particularly care to have black stained hands, and that will happen when you turn it wet. And I am very much an advocate of not wearing gloves. So that I do not do either. Nice clean. And get rid of some of the heels. A lot of the heel really in this case. This is the 5/8. To get it down to about 1/8 of an inch, something like that on the nose. Don't want to push too hard on that grinding wheel right there, because that one right there is an 80 grit CBN wheel. It's really designed more for reshaping stuff. And I've been working with those traditional scrapers, making them more so than anything, but it takes a lot of grinding to grind a tang on them, because it comes as a flat bar of steel. So the 80 grit CBN wheel just sort of melts it away, so to speak. So now we can come back over to the mess. Oh yeah. Now see, I was never, yeah, I've been married for 30 something years. I couldn't even tell you where I do have a wedding ring. I don't think it fits anymore, for one. No. There was a local guy, well, they owned a building materials uh, place in town here for many, many years. It was a family run business, but he was an avid woodworker, and just like you say, he did something or other, and I think it was actually on the table saw, and it got a hold of, he got his finger somehow or another into a blade, and he had a ring on, he had a wedding ring on, and he didn't lose his finger, but it was almost a situation where it was almost he should have lost his finger. But yeah, and I'm seeing so many people on Instagram and such as that, some of the wood turning Facebook groups and things like that. And it's professional people that are using gloves. Matter of fact, I just commented on, I think it was Kirk to here, who does a bunch of classes and stuff at Craft Supply, and I'm like, what the hell, dude? I'm like, what do you got gloves on for? The really bad part is all these people that want to wear gloves on the lathe are wearing these, new cheapy gloves that are rubber coated. And I'm like, it's bad enough you're going to wear a glove, but now you're wearing a glove that would stick fast to things. That doesn't work. I think I can sneak that in there. It won't. He didn't. I commented on it and I said about the gloves being a big no-no in most people's world, and he didn't. He just kind of blew it off like, well, I do it, so that's the way I want to do it. I'm like, it works for you, but there again, you're somebody that somebody may look up to or whatever, and oh, you were lucky. Yeah, you were lucky then. That could have just as easily, well, and it was slowing down, but could have just as easily ripped your finger off. That's the part that people don't seem to understand. This is a bit challenging. Really, I'm just trying to get this burl part down to something. Trying to think how, probably should leave it pretty thick. I leave it about an inch thick. It's probably about where we're at. And maybe that will help it, maybe. Of course, the challenging part here is definitely getting fatter as I go down, so I need to get more material out of there. I'm even going to have half a chance of it surviving. You're going to let me speed up just a little bit? Not much. This is kind of what you call an exercise in patience. Yeah. Well, yeah, and you're right. That's half the problem is that your instincts tell you to grab a hold of something, and even though your brain maybe says, no, it's not a good idea, but yeah, I've been fortunate over the years. I have never really had anything really overly bad happen as far as around any of my woodworking machinery. Mm. Had a couple close calls. That was a lot of years ago. I had an old Craftsman table saw, and it would never stay in alignment. Oh shit! Thank you. I thought I hit that. All right. Thank you. Gotta watch him. Sorry. He didn't miss much. Just me complaining because of it being a big chunk up here and nothing else anywhere else, and you can't seem to do much with it. But I got it down the sides. It feels like it's pretty even. So I was so minded that I actually check it. CRM. Okay. I'll sound dumb. What's a CRM? Okay. Okay. That is definitely a whole lot of. That's amazing. I didn't think I was going to get that curve made because it's sitting so high out here. It's not too bad. Feels a little bit fat in there yet, but because the handle wants to come back here in order to stay on the bevel. So that's the want to come back here to stay on the bevel. Now I run into that. I probably should go to the bottom bowl gouge. Or a really long scraper to get down there and get that last little bit. I'm going to try it with the bottom bowl gouge, which is the big one. So it'll take the overhang. I'm probably going to run into the same. I'm going to run into the same scenario. Yeah, I'm banging into that. At least I was able to get most of it out of there. Certainly not the most beautiful cut. But I think for a wet one, I think we're probably even enough. Yes. Could possibly go deeper in the center. It did sharpen the big scraper, but not sure that it's long enough to do what I need to do. Kind of questionable, but this one actually is a negative rake one. Don't think I would do, didn't give me a very pristine clean cut, but gave me a cut that's respectable for what we got, what it is. So I think on this one we'll just kind of quit while we're ahead. Put it in this paper bag and let it take a little nap. Doesn't appear that any of the burl, and there's a little bit of some little eyes coming through. So maybe once it dries, maybe it'll be more impressive. It's definitely going to be one of the oddest looking bowls I've ever turned. I did one years ago that was sort of similar in the aspect that it had a really big high side to it, and it was a real pain too. Once I got it thinned down, it was dry. Once it was dry and I got it thinned down, then with that high side on it, it didn't want to sit. It wouldn't sit on the table. So I ended up making a base for it to sit it in a base because of that. Okay, so let's go back. We're sort of going to end up doing this one similar. This one should at least be maybe a little better balanced. It does make it a bit challenging, it's 700 RPMs to going into something that's that much of an interrupted cut out in here. Definitely making me be very, very patient, which I'm not always overly great at. If we just take smaller bites, and I got rid of some of the imbalance, and now we managed to get up all the way to 800, but Every little bit's going to help on this. Also picked up some red cedar a week ago. Little sliver. Oh man. You too. Have a good dinner. Okay, we there? Yeah, we're at the right wall thickness. We're very nice and consistent there. There again, this is a burl. A little bit of a burl is sticking up there. There's some little, I don't know what you want to call them, little eyes in there. So we'll see. See whether it survives the drying. Since I did the wings, I was able to get another bit of speed out of it. And we're at least getting closer to the 1,000. We're up to about 940, 950. Which will make the tool cut more efficiently. If you go too slow, then your tendency is to push too hard on the tools instead of letting the wood cut. So we'll stop and measure that a little bit. Looks good. That's pretty close to where we're going to want to make our curve go around to keep our even wall thickness the whole way down. I was using a 40-degree gouge. Now I'll go back to the traditional swept back because the 40-degree gouge does not like to go around the corner. And that should be that. Check it one more time down in here. I get down, get on there, get down there too far. I can't really, but that looks all right. I try and keep it 1/16 of an eighth generally the 1/16 of an inch thickness wise, consistent thickness wise for the outside shape. That seems to have worked for me for quite a number of years. It's about an inch thick, I think, somewhere there. It's actually about almost an inch and an eighth. It'll just help it dry a little bit slower yet, but you can see some of the dark streaks in there. That's some figure in the wood there. They really don't show much on the outside yet because I don't think we're quite there. But once it's dry, this will get another probably 3/8 of an inch taken off the outside, and then whatever needs to be on the inside. Usually I make these to where they're going to be about 3/8 of an inch thick for wall thickness finished. Unless the bark manages to stay on, then maybe more like a 1/2 an inch thick, closer to a half. Anyhow, we will be cleaning everything tonight. That's kind of the other that's kind of a downfall of working with the wet wood. This has been waxed the last time I did wet wood, which is actually a couple weeks ago, but it does have a tendency to gunk things up pretty quickly. These last two will be very, very quick to do. This is going to let me run at whatever speed I want. And right now we're like 1600 just to even get started. That means all my cuts will be quicker. We just got to watch it. We don't run one into the other on the inside down in there. That's considerably thinner than the last one. So we'll just reset these. I think I left them sort of a little thicker than what they needed to be. So that looks fine. Go a little bit more with the 40-degree gouge to get some of that out, and then we'll just go to the wet back to finish it. Cut through center, especially when it's wet. It will really snap a big chunk out down there. Not quite sure what the pink streak, excuse me, what the pink streak is in them. I don't know. Maybe some sort of maybe a fungus or whatever. Looks like we're pretty good. We're probably a little bit, I'm actually probably a little shallower in the very center than I am on the walls, but I also have a tenant down there, all of which has to dry. That tenant will become a foot though. That won't get cut away. So that's 3 of the little guys done. Going pretty good because it's good because I have another one over there in the wings to do. That one's tenant could have been a shade bit bigger, but it's fine. The jaws are not touching. There's only about a 1/16 of an inch in between, which is okay. Won't hurt a thing. pretty much a perfect circle. Slow the speed down, bring the speed back up to what we want. Final pass on the outside. I'm going to slow down. I'm really concentrating on looking left eye, right eye. Left eye on the outside, right eye on the inside, because I'm tall, so I look straight down through this, and I can pretty much see exactly what the tool is doing. We got a little fatter as we went down, so we have to correct that. Burying my tools here in the dirt. Going to be more gentle this time. I'm going to use my 1/2 inch gouge to straighten it out. Close the flute when we get to the center. Go back to the bigger one. Some more of the waste. And go back to the swept back. Cut was getting too heavy in this down there in the center. It's just a matter of back off. We pick up a cut and make it a smaller cut. Because there's also about 3 or 3.5 inches of tool hanging over the rest, which is a fairly good amount. And that should be. Actually, I think I'm going to take one more little pass down through there. Because my fingers tell me when I run my fingers down, it runs down to here and abruptly curves. So I need to take a little bit out from there down into the center. And I'll take a little bit extra out of the bottom. Feels better? Not really. I left a hump. The curve didn't, my sweep on my curve didn't quite go in a nice sweeping pattern, I should say. Better. Just have to marry it into the bottom. this is where you practice all the proper procedures, maybe I'd say, because it is green wood. It cuts super easy. There is a bit of a hump up there, but I'm not going to get that fussy with it. But like I say, this is an ornamental cherry. Probably chances are slim to none that this stuff will survive. This big band of sapwood up here, a lot of times will give me a design opportunity, maybe not even a design opportunity that I will want. It may crack big time up through there, but you never know. They're always worth the kind of the effort of doing them. This last one is a piece of poplar, but still didn't find my proper drill bit. Got a whole bunch of poplar a couple weeks ago, several weeks ago really. I normally use a spade bit, but it was not in the drill. So, as usual, I obviously took it out and put it somewhere. Because that is the one that I normally would use, especially on something like that with the really big bark on it, or thick bark. I shouldn't say big bark. There it is. I knew it had to be laying here. I'll show you what I'm talking about. The Forstner bit over that way further. There is a there is a hole. There's a little bit of a hole right here. Well, that's where I had a nail drove in for the cardboard that I used to cut the circle out with. So even this spade bit's going to be a real challenge to get in there because it's going to want to hit that bark. I might have to, maybe I'll poke a deeper hole or something and then use a chisel and get rid of a little bit of that. But a Forstner bit, there's just no way to get in there to get at some of that stuff. So that's why I like the big, paddle bit, spade bit, whatever you want to call them. Let's see. Didn't manage to get it. Getting through the cambium layer is the challenge. It just wraps around a bit. I think we're just about there. There it goes. There again, poplar is a very thick bark. So, I mean, I've drilled a hole that's probably an inch deep at that point. This one will take a little bit longer than the last ones that I did. By virtue of it is twice their size, basically. I think. Guess it's about 12 inches across, maybe 13. No, I'll tell you 11. So we're going to start out 11 by actual wood being about 3. So it'll be a nice shallow bowl with bark. Like I say, poplar has very thick bark on it, rather big bark too. So we'll see today whether it cooperates. Tailstock support. Plastic is because I didn't do anything. I did when I cut this, and this has probably been like this maybe 6 or 8 weeks. It was freshly cut. It is starting to show signs of mold, but it also stopped it from cracking, and I didn't have to do anything, put any kind of sealer on it. It's not exactly perfectly cut. You can see that already, which very seldom ever are. But it is semi-round, so I will do some manipulating on this right from the very start. Not enough yet. Really looks like almost too much. Did I go the right way? Yes. The two high, believe it or not, as wonky as that looks, the two high points are lined up at this point. So it's going to be all kind of out of balance. I'll kick my pile chips out of the road so I got a place to put my foot. What makes it really look bad and really out of balance is the part that this is only about 2¼ inches of wood on that end grain versus 3¼ So that's what makes it really look super bad. Not that it isn't super bad, but so we'll go till we get a nice vibration, which just like the rest of some of the rest of the stuff this evening is not going to be very fast. Getting a little bit too big of a cut right there. I can see the shadow or the shadow line coming around that I was cutting. I was getting close to a 1/2 inch cut right there at one point, which is a little much for this at this point. And it really wasn't doing a very good job of being on the bevel, but that did get it fairly round on one. No, we still got straight bits of bark there. As far as the wood goes, it looks like it cut it the whole way around. Actually pretty good on that. Not so good on that. So, move it in that direction. so that we take more off here and less off the other side. This, like I say, this will be a very shallow natural edge bowl. I'm not really worried about that little bit out there that's way out of whack, because all that goes away at the bottom. And there's our low point. Looks reasonable. Like I said earlier, there's nothing says that when I do get this in balance on the bottom, get everything in balanced up on the bottom, get it flattened out compared to this over here, that we can always go back and move this some more. Because you know this is way out of whack down here. Getting closer out there. I don't think we're still quite there yet. No. But we're close enough that I can move my tool rest in a little bit better. Not worried about, not really concerned about. There's a little bit of chainsaw mark there. Now we're going to flatten out the rest of this to the center. We can continue with our little lightweight pull cuts, or we can just go out here and basically go straight into the side of the tree. All I'm doing is rotating my hip, pulls up against my side. As long as I don't try to go too fast, the tool won't bounce. You go at the speed it wants to be cut at, which I could probably certainly give it a whole lot more. Maybe not. Still not quite having the speed, but so now we got the surface flattened out in there. And get rid of this corner. And then we'll see what for size tenon we put on this one. We might actually put a pretty big one on it by virtue of the bigger piece. I could probably use the bigger 4-inch or 4¼ inch draws, and that would become the foot eventually. The gouge is also getting dull. At least it seems to be, put it that way. Kind of strange that it's not gonna let me. Doesn't want to let me go any faster, RPM wise. Should be pretty well in balance. Does have some of the traditional. A lot of poplar. Some poplar you get is all snow white. A lot of it has the green in it. There's some that they consider rainbow poplar that has like a purple color to it. It's really all the same poplar tree, just the rainbow one, that's some sort of minerals that get picked up in the ground. I'm just working out some sort of a halfway shape to it or whatever. And that's sort of a, what people would refer that to as a pull cut. As you saw, removed a whole lot of material in a hurry, but also really tears up the end grain. But in that particular instance, I was more interested in removing material, removing the bulk of the material. So now if I go back and use the bevel as you should, not quite to the rim, a little bit left there on the rim. Also don't think my foot should be quite that big. My big jaws is set to what I think the foot could be on this, so that it looks right. So if we go there, well, that's not far off. So now that I've established the size of that foot, or at least for now, I'll probably change my mind once it dries, but now we just need to work on getting the shape that I want. cut the whole way off to the top edge where the bark is. You can see this bark is quite thick. So we just need to make a tenon in there for that. Back to my trusty spindle gouge because we have a perfect mark where it needs to be. Make a little bit of it, make it a little bit of a dovetail. These are, you do use dovetail jaws. Crisp into the corner. A little bit of a tiny little bit of a flat there. Definitely a deep enough one. But it's not too deep that it's going to bottom out on the jaws. Just take a little bit more material out of there. Kind of like a shear cut with the bowl gouge. Handle is really low. Very, very light pressure. And you get these cute little wispy shavings off of it. A little bit hard to control as far as shape goes. But as far as finish goes off the tool, it's spectacular. Not the best shape I've ever made, I'm sure. But as a wet piece of wood, as a wet wood turn, it's fine. With a little bit of that so that it fits in between the jaws. Just out of curiosity, raise the tool rest a bit. Let's grab our scraper and see what it does on a wet poplar. Seems like it wants to gum up on the tip, and it chewed it up. That's interesting. Definitely does not. Definitely is too. It's either the fact that it's too wet, or it just doesn't like. Drop the rest down a bit. That might be a little bit too much above center for it too. And I think my burr needs to be redone because it definitely is still picking the grain up on that. So we'll just make one. And I really don't necessarily need to. Make one little light pass across it. Kind of fell short a little bit of the end, but that's okay. So the bark gets done distorting and everything that it does. Now this is nice and clean, except in there where I messed around with the scraper a bit. I think I'll make a tiny little cut with the spindle gouge in there, just so that I have a tiny little bit of a flat area for the jaws to seat on. More importantly than anything, that it's a clean little area for them to sit on, which it still doesn't look very clean. Better. Good enough for a wet piece. Not all wet wood will cut cleanly. I can't say that I've ever done a whole lot with poplar as far as to do, especially to do bowls. It's mainly to do spindle kind of work, trees and things like that. That's why I have the poplar. I got a truckload of logs. Turned them all into pretty much almost all of it into like 3x3 by whatever 14, 15-inch long billets, which will all be turned into trees for the painting ladies. Once they dry, which they won't get them this year, they'll get them next year or the year after. Why do I get the idea that screw around with that long enough? Did I make it too small? Nope. Just about perfect. Not really. It's a little closer to the being closed than what I wanted it. But it will hold it just fine. And we're probably going to need the longer tool rest. Got to make it to the center. Yeah, too close. If we change something, we'll slow the speed down. Bring our speed back up. Must be a lot of variation in the bark on this stuff or something. It should be in balance with where it's at, but it's not. I'm just going to remove a bunch of the bark. I do have a piece of that. Well, put it this way, this is what the guy told me it was. And he's one of my wood guys, but is the catappa you turn sort of a brownish color, like a light brown color? The piece that I had one other time was kind of a light brown in color. The piece that he gave me is almost a yellow. Yeah, yeah, that's right. I forgot that my uncle has a couple of them in his yard. He keeps saying he's going to take them down. He's like, "Do you want the wood?" I'm like, "I'll take some." I said, "Yeah, don't get carried away." So we'll leave it plenty thick. It is wet. It is very wet. This is one that would be kind of interesting if it would actually cooperate as far as the bark staying on. Gotta take some more off the rim because we got a little carried away on our shape. Quit laying tools in the chips. Quick way to lose a tool. That's why that set of measuring devices there, that's why they're so lovely rusted up, is because they ended up in, laid them behind the lathe just like I do a lot of other things. They actually ended up in a bag of chips. The only good part is I didn't get rid of the bag of chips quick enough, that early quick, and I missed them. Dig it way too deep. Make a little bit more. But it did do a job on as far as rusting it. I got them to look half decent, but it's sitting in a bag of popping wet chips for a week or so. It just didn't do them any justice at all. So I need to work more with the big bottom bowl gouge. So this is a good candidate since it is a big wide open bowl. I think that's going to be looking. It should look pretty good. I think this one has a really big foot on it. Yeah, that looks good. Could be, like I said earlier, it's probably a little thinner at the bottom, a little thinner as it went down than what it is up at the top, but it doesn't, except there's a nice big hump right there. Why is it big hump right there? No more hump. So that was a pretty good evening. I got started a little early. That still gives us five wet turn bowls for the evening. Now we get to clean up the mess. These will go into a paper bag, paper grocery bag, where they will sit for the next 8 months to a year. At which point then we get them back out and we do a second turn on them. Which I have a whole bunch right now that need a second turn, which is not unusual for me. It's a whole lot faster to do these wet ones, the green ones, than it is to finish them. Because if I was finished turning one, if I was really having a good day, I could maybe get 2 done in the evening like that. Generally, it'll only be 1. Kind of a little bit bigger foot than what I think it probably will end up being. But for right now, it's fine. Once it dries, then we'll see what we're going to do. We'll definitely have to true it back up, but kind of an interesting looking piece with the big wide coarse spark on it. I have never tried any of that. I've always tried to be patient with that part of it. Although I want to speed it up, and I really haven't done a whole lot of them with, especially with something of that size. But smaller ones like 6-inch, something like that, 6-inch natural edge or 6-inch bowl period, that would be green turned. I have a microwave that no longer is used for food, and that is another way of doing them. And the handful of them that I've done in the microwave, actually it worked quite well. I really didn't I think there was one of them or two of them maybe that showed some cracking, but for the most part, we went from a wet turn bowl today to a yeah. I watch quite a bit of Richard Raffin, and I'm not as brave as he is to put them in for a minute at a time or 2 minutes at a time. I'm more like 40 seconds, 50 seconds, because most of the time, even at that, they're quite hot to come out when they come out. But if I do it on my day off or whatever, the couple that I did, I would put them in one at a time or even 2 at a time if they were small enough in the microwave and do them for like 40 seconds on high, pull them out, and I use my phone to set a timer for like a half an hour or 45 minutes or whatever I was doing to let them cool off. Yeah. Now, like I say, I only played around with it, really only played around with it a couple times so far. Because it is time consuming. I mean, the microwave is not ever here in my shop with me, for one. So it's over in the next room. So that meant I had to keep running back and forth or whatever. But it did work. No doubt about it. Stinks. Depends on what kind. And there again, that probably depends on what kind of wood it is. I think I did some walnut. Some little walnut bowls. And it has a very distinct, maybe not even distinct and not pleasant odor. Put it that way. Because that's the room that I use to finish stuff in. So Well, the wood stove will make the stuff dry quick too, but probably too quick. Here's some good quality cherry shavings. Fill the rest of that bag. And I have another bag. I have a guy that takes these. I haven't taken him any in a while, but they haven't been doing a whole lot of work. So that can be his bag, and the other bag I will put on my garden. Just try and keep any of the weeds down. It seems to work fairly well. At least it did last year. But it does make a mountain of chips in a hurry. There is no doubt about it. As long as you don't put the wrong kind of wood. I'm trying to think of the one Mike Mahoney said about that at one time. He does a lot of work in the white oak. I think it's what he uses a lot of or did use a lot of. And I think he said that'll actually kill stuff, which makes sense. Any of the oaks have the huge amount of tannic acid in it, but well, some of the plants would love the oak chips. Anything that likes the acid, the high acid content or whatever. I know I gave oak chips to a guy that I used to shoot with because he grew grapes, and he specifically asked if I was going. I was doing at that time. I was doing a bunch of cabinet type work, and he asked if I was going to do anything in oak, and I said I was, and he said I'll take all them chips, and he put them around his grapes, and that would have been earlier, or fairly early in the spring, and so the grapes come in. He said they were just loaded with them, and he said it's because of all the extra acid they got. Because I guess he put some, there's some miracle acid stuff or whatever for like azaleas and roses and things like that. I actually didn't do too bad tonight. A little bit there. Not too bad. But I haven't. I don't do a whole lot of stuff in oak. I'm a fan of cherry for one. So a lot of the wood I managed to get will be cherry. And maple. So we could just go strictly overhead. Because I knocked the other camera crazy anyhow. Let's just go to there. Wax in a stick. Pretty neat. Plain magic wax. Made This was made by a private individual. Somebody was trying to get into business. I don't know whether he was ever really successful at it or not. But it does a neat job. And it's a very small little, looks like a oversized fat chapstick or something. But it makes things glide nice and easy, for sure. Put a little bit on. I use a little Scotch-Brite pad to sort of rub it in, and it's going to do two things for me. It's going to get rid of some of the gunk, as well as fill that gunk up with the wax. Keep things from rusting. Of course, if you had the robust lathe, you wouldn't have to worry quite as much about that. They're stainless, but I'm not in the market to spend that kind of money, that much money on a lathe. And we'll just let it haze over a little bit. Wipe off the excess. As you can see, it pulls up. Doing it that way is pulling up all that black, gooey, dewy stuff. Kind of nasty looking stuff. And it does last a while. I will give it that. I do my joiner and the table saw and stuff like that with it, and has a fairly, especially on things like that, like the table saw and the joiner, especially the table saw, it lasts for quite a while before before it wears away and starts to drag a little bit. But here, this is sort of getting gunked up on a weekly basis. Most of the rest of it just gets brushed down. It's really all it needs. A lot of the rest of the stuff doesn't really get overly wet. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. Try and keep things maintained rather than having to fix things. I don't know that we can get all these in one shot. If this is wide as it goes, already as wide as it goes. Yeah, it looks like it's fuzzy, so that means there's drops of water on that. So that's our five rough turn pieces. Yeah, we did get them all on there, except there's a drop of water on there. Close your eyes while I clean the drop off. Maybe. Maybe made it worse. Sort of made it worse. Lens needs cleaned. One of these days I'm going to be smart enough to actually move that over to... I used to have it over to the side more. I need to go back to doing that. So, other than that, that's going to be a wrap for me tonight. So I'm going to go over here to my trusty YouTube channel and end that one. And tell those good people to have a good week. And if you didn't already subscribe and you could subscribe, that would be wonderful. Otherwise, I'm here Saturday evenings generally. Have a good week. And we'll